Hiya. Hello? Hello, hello. Maybe I can, just turn on my own stream over here. Bump that viewer count. Mwahaha. I've tweeted about how we are live. Krista has retweeted that. That's very kind. I've got my brain tea going in the background. We can address that in a moment. So minimize that thing. Pull that thing over here. Get the chat in front of me. We're live now. Live now. Live Moss. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey folks. Oh, it's dark. I forgot to make it not dark. Forgot to make it not dark. There's always something, you know? How's everybody, doing or not doing out there? Tired, eating a burrito. I'm tired today too. I'm very tired today. Hopefully we can get through this together. Oh, we have a visitor. Hey baby. Come to bless the beginning of the streams. Ooh. Okay, never mind. I tried to pick him up from his tum-tum, and he did a bunny leap off of the piano. So he's not interested in getting picked up right now. Now he's looking at me. Why you do that? Chopin. He'll live. Oh, speaking of Chopin, that's my brain tea bubbling over. So we're gonna go to my new splash screen while I get my tea. Are you ready for this? Whoa. I've only got the two photos in the slideshow right now. in that folder. Those are the only two that I downloaded. I have more, but like, it takes time. It takes time to compile something. All those, like, off my... Most of the pictures are on my phone, so I'm gonna have to send them over and then, you know, organize them in that folder in some kind of way, and yada yada yada. Thank you for your critique, Krista. Yes, it's just the two pictures. Okay, so why are we really here? Why are any of us really here? That's the big question we're going to answer tonight. Why are we here? I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so that I'm not disturbed. Perfect. You've always wanted to know. Yeah. We are here to talk about form, which is so completely overambitious of me to attempt. But it's a topic that I, you know, in my own musical life, have a lot of questions about, like, how I mean, as a wannabe composer, how do you get good is one of the big questions. I didn't put that one up, or rather, I translated that sentiment into some of these other big questions that you can see right over here. Look, I'm pointing at graphics on screen. I'm a real broadcaster. Look at me go. But I guess let's start by, because like this is gonna get into some high level territory probably, but I also want to, you know, establish some foundations about form. For folks of any level. And so I would actually welcome any questions that anybody has right away to just throw up on the board here. Oops, sneak preview. Like, what is form? Definitely counts. And that's such a that's a topic in and of itself. But I've got some, get this, supplementary materials ready just below some of our big questions for us to begin to answer that. But if anybody out there has questions of their own to throw up on the board, now's the time, or any time, but I'm explicitly soliciting them at this moment. Or if you just wanted to say a little something about what you may know about form, what you think about form going into this, you can toss some of those up. And to hear about exactly what you mean by form before you have any questions, that's fair. You know what? We're gonna make that a real big question. What is form exactly? That's a real question. And we deserve to examine it. Triangle, have any thoughts? Fair enough. Let's try to wrap our heads around what form exactly is by looking at some of these supplementary materials that I have gathered to attempt to make myself seem a little bit more professional, to seem a little bit more like I know what I'm talking about. So up top, here's a definition that I rather liked, taken from some supplement that I came across at work today while I was supposed to be doing my real job. This is taken from a PDF of some tips that apparently lived on artofcomposing.com, a resource that I was not really aware of and can't really speak to. But what do they have to say? Musical form, they say, is an emergent feature of music. This is what I really liked about this definition. It's an emergent property of music that happens over time when you combine the separate musical elements, melody, harmony, rhythm, tempo, texture, perhaps more elements. Part of the mystery of musical form is why it creates for us certain feelings of time or temporality, the state of existing within or having some relationship with time. So form, they're saying, is something that you can point to in music or describe about music that is generated by the musical content in some way, and specifically is telling you something about those elements' relationship to each other and to the whole within time. More specifically, probably the bounds of time that that a piece of music exists within. For we can certainly call music a temporal art form. You might remember a quote on Twitter from a few weeks back of someone saying music is how we decorate time. I think from some of these definitions that we'll see, that's fairly on the mark with some scholarship. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about this? The mystery of musical form, I like how it says here. Let's go back up top, actually, and we'll continue taking our notes, right? Form tells us something about time. A piece's relationship to time, and perhaps also discrete musical elements' relationship to time. When you're talking about form, are you talking about different types of compositions like sonata form, etc.? You've activated my trap card. So as Bruce Adolphe has said many times in his fantastic lectures, which you should all check out, Bruce Adolphe likes to say, sonata form is so not a form. A delightful turn of phrase. In the sense that it's a little bit deceptive. He says it's so not a form in the sense of when scholars try to talk about sonata form as a recipe, for example, of your introduction and development and recapitulation and so on and so forth. It starts to fall flat as the number of sonatas that follow these strictures to the letter are in the minority. So he's saying like the idea of sonata form as something strict isn't quite right, but we could absolutely talk about common forms like the rondo form or ABA form, and ask ourselves what some of these common forms that we sort of know about tell us about what a form actually means. I'm going to put that under here, actually. What do common forms like rondo, sonata, etc. tell us about what forms are in general? I think that leads us to a great question. You're probably hearing those sounds. Oh, I bet I can just mute that forever. Because what some of these common forms are and how they're built, to me, is a bit of a sorry, I was gesturing with the mouse. A bit of a form versus structure question, and we might examine that in a bit. Let's see. Form comes from how musical elements are arranged. We could say arranged in relationship, although I think that's a bit redundant. We can just say how musical elements are arranged, how they exist with each other. Let's return to this. Definition. Over time, when these elements are combined, so you might say when form emerges from how some of these elements interact over time. I think form is a way for us to organize a piece mentally by finding some of its patterns. Finding some patterns in musical elements of what stays the same, what's changing, what's repeating, and how these things are held up or mutated, or have really strong contrast over time. We start to see this big picture of what a piece of music is doing, apart from the content itself, apart from what the melody is doing. Right, there's something bigger going on. We start to learn about form that way. What's this next one? I should have written down where I took this from. Hold on. I think I still have it up in a tab. It's from some Oxford something. oxfordacademy.org.uk. Year 8 music. Form and structure in music is where this comes from. Okay, great. They tell us, when a composer is writing a piece of music, they must plan their work every bit as carefully as an architect designing a building. Potentially. We can talk about whether that much planning is actually required. Most composers definitely choose to plan in this way. But we'll get into that. In each case, the finished work must have, again, all these musts. We can put question mark next to those. Must have continuity, balance, and shape. Okay, more keywords all of a sudden. Or form. Relating this to what we've learned so far about talking about a piece's relationship to time. So continuity, definitely a time-based idea already. They're saying that this piece has an identity through line, if you will, that it's over its course in time, it remains consistently itself in some way. Is how I'm interpreting continuity. Continuity, balance, and shape. Or form. Shape, I think, is so nebulous as to not even bear fruitful investigation at this time. But balance is an interesting idea. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm thinking about composition and form in visual art quite a lot as I'm learning more about drawing and painting, composition, and trying to apply some of these concepts to music. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But balance is in visual arts idea, balance is not necessarily symmetry. This is very, very important. Right, if we imagine our little seesaw, we can have symmetrical weight. We can have equal weight on both symmetrically away from the fulcrum, the same distance away from the fulcrum, and that's one type of balance. But we could also have like a really heavy weight near and a very lightweight far, and this is also a form of balance. It's asymmetrical, but it's balanced. So I think we should keep that in mind as we move forward. Whereas architecture is concerned with a balance in space, music is a balance in time. So again, all of these definitions of form so far are talking about time. I think time is super duper important. We use the form to describe the way in which a composer achieves this balance by arranging and setting in order, possibly the same thing, their musical ideas. The way in which they design and build up the music. Are we getting a clearer idea of what we might be talking about when we're talking about form? I feel like I'm becoming more confident. But again, anybody with questions should shout them out at any time. Very important here, this word describe, right? I'll say it, I might as well make it part of my brand, if you will, but I'll say this, until the end of time. Music theory is grammar. It describes what musicians are doing and why. It's a way of describing why music is effective. It is not a top-down rules for a living, right? So when we talk about form, we are attempting to describe something that a composer has done or a musician has done. They may or may not have had that form or any form specifically in mind, although I think some of the most successful pieces, they definitely did. But this word describe I really like here. We're describing the way in which a composer achieves this balance by arranging and setting order their musical ideas. Again, the way in which they're arranging and balancing some of these musical materials, musical elements, melody, harmony, rhythm, tempo, texture, some more. What would another one be? These are pretty strong, honestly. I think if you were to add anything, you might be able to make an argument that it fits under there. Let's keep going. We can think of the form of a piece of music as being the overall structure of the piece. So now we're starting to conflate these two terms, form and structure. And I, as somebody who is vehement about the difference between theater spelled E-R and theater spelled R-E, I would like to say here and now that if we're going to talk about form and structure, that these have to be distinct in some way. Maybe one contains the other, but I don't think we should be using them interchangeably. Overall structure, it says, the composer must add to their basic structure with interesting detail, and to do this, they use a variety of musical materials. Okay, so we're talking, and when they do this, right, what emerges is form, perhaps. Even in a fairly short piece of music, a composer rarely finds that one musical idea is enough. Fair. But too many ideas following each other in a haphazard fashion would make the music appear disorganized and without purpose, to lack form and structure. So they must aim at a careful balance, keyword again, between the two basic ingredients of all musical forms and structures, bold claim, repetition and contrast. And I don't remember, okay, I didn't actually put in their section on repetition and contrast, but we may as well pull it in. We may as well pull it in. Because it's a good idea. All right. Go away dialogue. Gonna watch how the sausage is made for a second. Okay. That is good enough. This is the very next thing on the same exact page. I just neglected to clip it. Okay, so they tell us we're attempting to organize our musical ideas, and some of these tools that we are using to organize our ideas, our melodic ideas, our harmonic ideas, tempo, our rhythmic ideas. What was the fifth one? Texture, our textural ideas. The tools in our toolbox for organizing these ideas and thereby generating a form. Remember, we talked about a form as something emerging from this process of arrangement, or the result of the arrangement. So they're telling us that two of our most important tools are repetition and contrast. Let me say that again. Two of our most important tools are repetition and contrast. So what did I do there? I repeated the exact same sentence, as you may have picked up on, and I attempted to bring in some contrast by changing some of the emphasis there, by putting a bit more of a dramatic pause between repetition and contrast. So I said the same exact words, but I contrasted this repetition in some way. Hopefully that came across. Krista says I'm a smarty. Oh, thanks. Some repetition and contrast of musical ideas is necessary in order to bind the music together, to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, to bring unity to the piece. Okay, so now here we're saying that through repetition and contrast we get unity, or perhaps a sense of continuity, one of those things that we talked about before. Some melodies may be heard twice or even more during a piece. Yeah, I mean, some for example, a theme and variations. The whole idea is that you hear this initial melody over and over and over with as many different contrasts, harmonic contrasts, contrast of time, textural, rhythmic contrasts, as the composer can devise. One of my favorite things to do. I was going to say one of my favorite forms. But I'm a huge fan of theme and variations. Maybe we'll talk about why, or ask ourselves why in a bit. Think of these as musical landmarks to help you find your way around the music. This is super, super important, right? If we recognize some element of repetition, we can plant these mental waypoints in our understanding of what we are hearing. What's going on here? We have a repeated rhythmic idea. Same rhythm. The melody has changed in some way. First it was going up. Now it's heading back down. Some contrast there. There's some continuity to that idea. There's sort of an arc idea happening there. Then we have this second thing come in. Same rhythmic content. We actually hear this twice. Interesting. Some more precise repetition within the bigger structure. We're hearing this twice. I think if we were to, harmonize a bit here, we would hear. What is it? Oh, kind of like that. So the rhythm and melody are remaining the same, but we're contrasting harmonically here within this smaller section. And then all of a sudden we've heard our initial idea once again. This is another, should be another instant waypoint in our minds, right? We had, just to finish things out, this. So the exact same arcing melody we heard at the very beginning, now we're hearing it again at the end. We had an A section, a B section, which again also had some repetition and contrast ideas in and of itself, and then we heard the A section again. ABA form has emerged from some of the musical decisions that we tracked in that little excerpt. Anybody following? Hopefully that all made sense. Important for the composer to introduce new and contrasting ideas so the music has variety and interest and doesn't become boring. We can do this in several ways. The most likely is they will bring in a new tune or melody. So yeah, in our example, instead of doing that exact same thing again, we brought in a new melody working with some of the same rhythmic material. Other ways of making musical contrast into a change of key, rhythm, tempo, dynamics, mood, texture. Any of these musical elements changing from one waypoint to another is contrast. It can be soft. It can be huge. Use one of these at a time, or maybe several, depending on how striking a contrast they may wish it to be. Yeah, totally. Okay, let's go back to our notes up top and see if we've learned anything more. Form comes from how musical elements are arranged. Common tools for arranging ideas. Repetition, contrast. Oh, let's go ahead and... Whoa, that's very bold! Okay. Are form and structure the same thing? Yeah, this is where it gets so tricky, because when we talked about the ABA form emerging from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, this example, it starts to get really murky whether we call that the form or the structure of that piece. I'd be curious if anybody were to invent their own distinction between those two. What might you say? Leave some time for the stream lag.
The form as being the overall organization of the music, but structure is the more detailed stuff like chords. Yeah, that's the direction that I am tending to lean myself. Is that structure is sort of like some of the scaffolding decisions that are made within a section of a work, and then form is like, you know, what that outline ends up looking like. Structure is some of the internal nuts and bolts, and form is the silhouette that emerges, possibly. Yeah. All right. We've had two simple ones. So we've built up some of our ideas about what form is, what it's, how it emerges, and so on. And now we're going to dive into some of the real shit, if you will. This is a section from Theodor Adorno, well-known writer on art, and this is going to be a much more in-depth look. We're just looking at this first paragraph. Hopefully, with the foundation that we have just built, we can understand more of what Adorno is telling us here. The self-evident that music is a temporal art, that it unfolds in time. Okay, we know this. We're good so far. This means in the dual sense that time is not self-evident for it, that it has time as its problem. So Adorno is saying here that music, these repetition and contrast decisions that we're making with our musical elements to create balance in time, he's saying that the time that we are working with, or perhaps working against, as we compose, is the time itself is sort of the fundamental medium or material or problem of music as an art. Maybe Adorno would say that that painting has the blank canvas as its problem. I suppose we might make a similar comparison here. Let's keep going. It must create temporal relationships among its constituent parts, justify their temporal relationship, synthesize them through time. Conversely, it itself must act upon time, not lose itself to it, must stem itself against the empty flood. So here's where my blank canvas analogy seems to have made a little bit of sense unexpectedly. He's talking about music acting upon the otherwise emptiness of time. I think there's a similar argument to be made that painting or drawing seeks to act upon the otherwise empty canvas. To you know how in visual art we talk about negative space. The blank page doesn't have any negative space on it yet. It's that's the default. But if you paint a square on there, now the canvas has negative space. Do you see what I'm getting at? And so music, by acting upon time, is now, creating. I hate to say the term, but negative time, if you will. There is which is different from what he calls the empty flood of time. That feels crucial to me. The old aim of secular music, that of the divertissement, that distracts from boredom, testifies to this, a fact that lives on in the relationship to time of autonomous music, which binds itself to time at the same time as it sets itself against it, antithetically. Whoa, what a sentence. Okay, so he's saying we gotta act upon time, that time is our problem. The old aim of secular music, of distracting from boredom, testifies to that idea. I'm not sure what he's calling autonomous music. Autonomous music, which binds itself to time as it sets itself against it, which is antithetical, right? Those are opposing ideas, supposedly. I'll confess, I've read this in the morning and I've reread it a few times. So I'm not just attacking this passage blind. Autonomous music, I would almost think he's talking about ambient music that is taking as its purpose the filling of time in a background sort of way, but also is meant for you not to experience time. Is that possible? Anybody have thoughts on that? Any ideas about what he might mean about autonomous music? I'm open to. And I'm going to sip my tea while I wait for answers to emerge from the ether. Folks are probably thinking and typing, but I will continue because it feels weird to have some dead air. Here as there, Zeitkunst, the temporal art, is equivalent to the objectification of time. This applies to the individual events or musical content to the extent that they come together in a context by means of the organization of their sequence, rather than dissolving as they pass away. Okay, let's take a second and digest that. Well, he's contrasting the old aim of secular music with or so he's talking about secular music in general, and he says, okay, there are two types. This is how I'm reading it. There are two types of secular music: this old world way, which is distracting you from boredom, and autonomous music, both under that secular umbrella, I think, is what we were looking at. Yeah, this is a dense one, absolutely. Much more dense than our previous examples. And I don't pretend to have fully grasped it. We're attacking this together. Okay. The individual events or musical content, so the harmony occurring as a moment, for example, that's an individual event, to the extent that they come together in a context. Autonomous music for music's own sake. That's probably that's a great interpretation of that. That might be totally on the money. Thank you very, very much for that. So then he's saying there's difficulty small that distracts, that is taking it upon itself to distract from boredom, and then there's autonomous music for its own sake. You might be onto something there. Okay, individual events to the extent that they come together in a context by means of the organization of their sequence, rather than dissolving as they pass away. Individual events come together in a context by means of the organization of their sequence. So, two events such as two harmonies, they're coming together in a context by means of the organization of their sequence. So I'm playing this before this, and a moment of contextualization has occurred by their ordering. That is different than if I were to play this moment and have that stay itself. Even though when we do this, that first moment, that first chord is no longer being played. That musical event is no longer occurring in real time, but it remains important to contextualize this moment that has happened after it. You feel like this author's making complicated sentences for the sake of complicated sentences. I disagree. I've read a bunch of Adorno before, and this is dense, but he's got ideas. So, by arranging the events in this order, even though that first chord is gone, it's gone but not forgotten. Right? It's linked together with what comes after it. It's created context. Okay, this applies to the individual events of context and to the temporal dimension itself, which aims potentially at its own self-transcendence, based on the strength of the unity of what occurs within it. This is a translation as well. So that could be an element of what you're talking about, Krista. But let's set those feelings aside and engage with the work. Okay, so he's talking about the of time itself, of moments, of stretches of time, by the music that happens in time as a medium, which is a great idea. That music is about creating beautiful time as much as it is about creating beautiful sounds. Is how I would interpret that. Right, of inspiring in you a moment of something, right? Fear, awe, whatever it might be. In film, we talk about like the moment as being super important. So I think that's what he's getting at here. If time is the medium that, as flowing, seems to resist every reification, nevertheless, music's temporality is the very aspect through which it actually congeals into something that survives independently. So the essence of time is that it keeps going, is that it flows. Music existing in time is a way of creating these contextual relationships in time that turn time into an art object. What one terms musical form, we got there, we got to form. What one terms musical form is therefore its temporal order. The nomenclature form refers the temporal articulation of music to the ideal of its spatialization. Okay, time keeps going, and so it resists this objectification and elevation. He's calling reification, kingification. Music has this property by, well, I already said it earlier, I'm repeating myself. By contextualizing time, music acts upon time and turns time into something a bit more emotionally tangible, we might say. Oof. Okay, I promise that is the most dense that we're gonna get tonight. And now it's time to leave him behind and synthesize what we might have learned here. Form tells us something about time. Okay. Form. Good, because you didn't understand a word of that. That's okay. I got a few things out of it, and hopefully you understood a couple of things that I was saying. But if not, that's okay too. So let's start this by saying form. Okay, so music creates contextual ideas in time. That elevates time, that allow time to be felt. Music deals with time as its problem, as its blank canvas. Form is the shape of relationships that emerge not only in musical content, but in musical ideas, relationship to their placement in time. Musical content. And I lost it. Shape of relationships that emerge not only in musical content, but in musical ideas of relationship to their placement in time. And time's relationship to the work. That is all. Okay, I feel like this has told us something really important about the difference between form and structure. We were talking about form as the silhouette before. If music is the paint that we put onto our blank canvas of time, form is the shape of what we, or structure is the the shape of what we, all the strokes and shapes and whatnot that we've placed inside, and form is this relationship of the whole to all of its parts, but also to the blank canvas. And what we might call, negative time in this sense is this idea of music's existence in time, elevating time in some way, in a way that painting something intentional on the canvas elevates the canvas ideologically. Anybody following? Anybody interested? Anybody still here? Okay, so let me write all that down. So if music is the paint we place on the blank canvas of time, structure is the internal techniques of what we paint. Form is the relationship of the whole to all of its parts.
and also to the canvas. That feels pretty definitive. I want to be careful if I haven't missed something in that. Let me make that a little smaller. Something about that when it was blank. Maybe. Oh, thank you for hanging out, Triangle. I'm glad we got to some kind of answer about something right before you had to head out. So I think the answer of like why does form matter and doesn't matter, does form matter? I think according to what we've said, yes, it does. It seems like form is actually super duper important, actually. Thank you again, Triangle, for spending your time intentionally here in the music stream, meaning making in that way. It wasn't music, but maybe you were elevating time in your own way. Maybe it was music. Maybe this stream is music. Okay, there's a reason that I am thinking so strongly about music as this painting metaphor. Everything is music if you believe. Krista, that's honestly what all of my student debt taught me. If you can avoid going to music school, that's the answer. Everything is music if you believe. That's pretty. That really is a substantial portion. Okay, I feel like we've talked a little bit about what makes a form musically, right? How these musical elements interact, how we've chosen to arrange them, repeat them, contrast them. I'm going to skip this big question. I'm going to skip over and go to how can we learn and understand form. Because and beyond just internalizing and listening really intentionally to oodles and oodles of music, I think that we can study form by examining other art forms. Hey, Chopin. Look at that boy. Look at that fun boy. By examining other art forms, and to me, I think, and I mentioned already, drawing and painting, visual art, is something that I've sort of latched onto pretty strongly as a way of investigating form.
And to that end, I've got a couple paintings here. Not as many as I might have if I had started compiling them earlier. But I've picked up Starry Night here. Super famous painting. Y'all know and love. And I'm interested in a particular... Let me back up. Okay, so one thing that I, as a composer, musician, whatever, am extremely jealous of in visual art is its immediacy. Music, as we've talked about extensively already tonight, is a temporal art form. By necessity, it is experienced over time, usually a decent chunk of time, sometimes a very large amount of time. And an image like this, you can take in this whole almost instantly. You're not going to truly see everything that's there, but you can experience a lot of what's happening in a visual artwork in much less time and for less energy, you might even be able to say, than sitting down to listen to, God forbid, a 40-minute orchestral work, right? We can take in this image and immediately look at these cool swirlies and all these light orbs and the big spire and this little spire. This is, hey, look at that, repetition of a shape idea. All these blues, all the little houses. We can take all of that in really, really, really quickly. What I have thought about, and admittedly, haven't committed to doing in a way that I really like to, because the other way that you interact with a painting like this when you stand in front of it long enough is after taking the whole thing in at once, right? Maybe your eye is drawn right here to this little steeple, and maybe your eye follows it up to this hill and slides down these hills and over up this leafy spire, and you hang out over here for a second, and it's this curve takes your eye up here, and then you swirl around in this star globe for a bit. And depending on where you decide to get off with your eye, maybe you jump off here, maybe you jump off over here. You can swirl over in this way and come back through the big swirl and live here and do this, and then this has returned you to the spire, and you come down these waves on this side of the spire, and so on and so forth. That is a journey of intentionality that occurs in time. That the way that one's eye travels across the composition of visual artwork, I think has a lot to tell us about what musical form can look like, what can look like, what musical journeys through time can feel like. If you were to, like, maybe even take a loop or a glass, or maybe like a cardboard tube even, right? And zoom in on this thing and really take in, this journey moment to moment of like, okay, the spikiness of this, and then like how this curve feels, what the colors look like in this region, and turn this into a sequence of ideas that you can interpret musically. I believe that with, a little luck and a little planning, what you interpret musically will have the shape of the eye's journey through a painting like this. And because this is widely considered a masterful painting with great composition, you've essentially modeled your musical work on the experience of a great composition of another art form. And we're hoping some of that greatness will rub off, essentially, through abstracting that. That's an exercise that I haven't done yet as a composer. As a theorist, as a theorist, my work is done. Great, I've theorized that you can do that at the end. As a composer, I would actually have to sit down and take some of these journeys, record myself talking about what I'm experiencing as I travel through the painting. Maybe even like create some kind of little screen capture thing, and then actually take that digital magnifying glass and trace it along the contour of the work, and have a little video to reference that has some of these things in it. Let's look at a different painting. My boy, Kandinsky, my dude. Tragically, I have two of Kandinsky's books or writings, Point and Line to Plane, and Concerning the Spiritual in Art. Because Kandinsky, as a painter, was profoundly interested in the relationship of painting to music. And I'm coming at it from the other direction. And it is entirely possible that, because I've loved Kandinsky since I was young, it's entirely possible that the musicality of Kandinsky's work as compositions is what has drawn me to him, and what has kept me engaged by his work for such a long time. Why I can keep coming back to pieces like this. Also, I really like the blending of colors in here, and like some of these lines and curves look awesome. Like there's, I'm absolutely appreciating it on that level also. Let's think about some of our, so remember how we mentioned repetition and contrast as some of the tools in our compositional toolbox musically. I think here we can see how repetition and contrast are expressed visually, and hopefully that can tell us something more about how to do it musically. Look at these semicircles over here, for example, these bouncy boys. on this flat line here. We also see this semicircle shape here, right underneath it. So you know they're related. Like these are the exact same size. You can see that these ideas are talking to each other in some kind of way. And so like these guys are flat, and they've got a white background, and they've got these colored outlines, and then immediately beneath them they've got these guys that sort of drift off downward. So we have a repeated shape idea, and then it's contrasted by color and value a bit, right? These circles, semicircles, also seem to get a little bit fainter. As our eye travels up here, look, here we see more bouncy boys. 4 of them again. These ones have color outlining them, like our homeboys down here. But they're at this totally new angle. That's a sense of contrast. Their size relationship to each other is different than either of these two, right? Here they were all equal. Here one is smaller than the rest. And indeed, I think this one is smaller than the others as well. So we've like, our eye has told us something about this idea, how it can be manipulated, and then this up here is compounding our understanding of how this semicircle motif is expressed. So 1, 2, 3 repetitions of this. I think a visual artist would call it a rhythm, perhaps. Certainly this we can keep calling them bouncy boys, because that's what they are. Okay, and now check this out. Okay, so we've understood this. Bunch of semicircles on the line. We've understood this. Bunch of semicircles on their own, also sort of interacting with the line. All the same size. Wiggles. We've understood this. Okay, now look, our semicircle thing can be at an angle. It can interact with this line behind it in a different way. Now that we've like really examined this super closely, take a look at this thing. Like having thought about all our bouncy boys elsewhere in this painting, this looks to me like a new expression of some of these same concepts. We have curves interacting with this line and they're expressing these semicircle-ish shapes by the way this one continuous curve is interacting with the line. This now feels thematically related to these other shape experiences in this work. Anybody out there have their own ideas about what? What sort of? Let's open it up. What kind of stuff can you see in this damn thing? I've focused on that one idea because it's what came to mind. But what else are you seeing here? And the question of like how to take this and then run with it musically, right, is a whole other thing entirely. First thought when I saw this was an orchestra tuning up, all the different instruments doing their thing. That's awesome. That's a very distinctive texture. And Kandinsky might have deliberately attempted that before. I'm going to look up real quick if there's any scholarship on what precisely he was going for here. Let's see what the Guggenheim Museum has to say. Yes, I will allow cookies. Kandinsky regarded composition 8 as the high point of his post-war achievement. Lovely. Role of circles in this painting foreshadows the dominant role they would play in many subsequent works. Very cool. Lots of circles. Love them. Great shape. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if there's any quick statement on Kandinsky's intent with this. Okay, yeah, so his goal for all of the composition series, of which this is the 8th, was to paint what music sounds like. So this was, which I didn't actually realize. I mean, I knew that was something that he dealt with, but I didn't know that that was an intent of this piece in particular. Something cold period. Oh, here's a great quote from him. Form itself, even if completely abstract, has its own inner sound. Kandinsky aimed to formulate an abstract language which would cause strong emotions in the audience to a large extent the same way as it does the music. Anyway, I love Kandinsky. I love what he's trying to do. I want to have all the Kandinskys all the time. Oh boy. Didn't actually play much music this time. But I think that's okay. Because we got into some real stuff. Have any other new questions emerged? So I have a feeling that otherwise we might think about calling it a night. I don't know if we have an answer to this one. How much of a piece's character identity is inextricable from its form? Can a piece change its form and remain itself, or these two different pieces that use the same musical material? You know, after talking through all of this, when I started, I might have thought I might have said that there must be some element of a piece's identity that is separate from its form, but now after trying to talk through it for an hour and a half, I'm starting to feel like, especially as form is what emerges from the piece being itself, that not necessarily that the form is the piece, but the form absolutely is the resulting shape of the piece's identity. And to change its form is to change its internal relationships. That is a change of identity. It could be a small one, but it is a transformation of some kind. All right. Any final thoughts? Any final questions from our good folks out there in Theory Land? Yeah, me too. And hopefully we talked about it at a really high level, but hopefully you've come away with some ideas about how to listen differently and what you might listen for in music. Yeah? Wonderful. That's probably the best I can hope for. All right, on that note, 7:33, solid stream. I think we're going to call it for the evening. I hope everybody has a nice rest of their evening. I hope you came away with something cool. I hope you come back. I don't know what next Theory Thursday might explore, but I feel like if I can if I can attack something like this, I can talk about pretty much anything else. And that's exciting. We'll probably be back here on Sunday, playing some more Heaven's Vault, translating some ancient scripts. That'll be a lovely time. And then I may or may not return for Tuesday. I'm thinking about potentially retiring Tuesday to focus on my own actual musical work, because I don't do that very much. Or it might turn into more of like a like if I keep the streaming time slot, it might be more of a like live in the workshop sort of thing. We'll see what happens there. But I hope y'all come back. I hope to talk to you again soon. That's it. That's the thing. Good night, everybody. Good night.